I want to start by specifically thanking the advocates, service providers, law enforcement agency partners, and nonprofits who have been our partners on this mission from day one. Specifically from the Department of Justice, my good friend, Division Director Abby Rogers. And members of our brand new team and some who have been with us for much longer. Caroline Brittingham, Michael Cooksey, Julianne Neary, Oliver Cleary, who's not with us, okay, couldn't make it. He's probably hard at work because that's what Oliver does. And Zoe Berhoples, all from the DOJ. Did I get everybody? Okay. From law enforcement, I know that we have on top of one of our speakers, who is Delaware State Police, Danny Meadows is with us, and Detective Patrick Campbell from the Delaware State Police, Detective Crystal Weidman, Delaware State Police, and Detective Jamie Tobin from the Wilmington Police. And I'm not sure if Detective Thomas Ford from the Delaware State Police was able to join us, but there you are. Good to see all of you. From our advocacy and service community, Lauren Arnold from the Salvation Army, Major Sheehan from the Salvation Army, Diana Suchudolski from Meet Me at the Well Foundation, Paul Stock from Zoe Ministries, and Farron Brown from Zoe Ministries. And I also want to make specific mention of Senator Nicole Poore and Representative Kim Williams, who have acted tirelessly throughout the years. When no one was paying attention, they made sure that the state of Delaware paid attention. So thank you for all you have done to combat human trafficking. And Brian Moore, the chair of the Human Trafficking Council, and also a Department of Education specialist. So thank you for your hard work and advocacy and leadership. And so I also want to thank the members of the press who are here today, because you are shining a light on a subject that is of great importance to all of us in the state of Delaware who have worked for a really long time to come together today to announce the creation of our first ever Human Trafficking Unit. These dedicated public servants will be prosecuting cases, will be investigating and dealing with matters on the civil side. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. But suffice it to say, they have been behind the scenes for a very long time working on human trafficking matters. Today actually wraps up Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And as I look back over the last decade, the difference is night and day. This state has made substantial strides, not only in recognizing human trafficking for what it is, but in educating the public in terms of enforcement through law enforcement officers and in terms of our own laws, thanks to the people in this room. Combating human trafficking has been a top priority of my administration. And it's an issue where we've had to be creative, because by their nature, these crimes happen in the shadows. And they are committed by increasingly sophisticated criminals. I came to this mission a very, very, very long time ago. Decades ago, when I was a young prosecutor, I was assigned to investigate and then prosecute a case in which a man abducted, tortured, and murdered 5 women, many of whom were involved in the sex trade and routinely walked along the Route 40 corridor. What I can tell you is that as a young prosecutor, I had no idea what was really behind human trafficking in this state. But it most certainly existed back then. And it wasn't until I got to know the stories of the lives of these women, the horrific backgrounds in which they were raised, the abuse they endured, the fact that they often turned to illegal drugs to hide their pain and to get through from one day to the next. On the last night of Shirley Ellis's life, for example, it was around Thanksgiving, and she had no car, no means of transportation, and she lived with her family in Brookmont Farms. Shirley intended to become a nurse. She had left the life, or so she hoped, that required her to walk that Route 40 corridor all the time. And on this fateful evening, she was taking a Thanksgiving dinner to a friend of hers who was in the hospital in Wilmington, sick with AIDS. Shirley made it to the Route 40 corridor, and as she walked along, hitchhiking for a ride into town, she didn't realize that that would be the last day of her life. And she didn't realize, most certainly, that her life would end only after enduring unspeakable pain and torture at the hands of a serial killer. As a result of getting to know the lives of these women, as a result of meeting so many others along Route 40 during the course of that investigation and prosecution, my eyes were opened. And no more could I ever drive down Route 40 and see women walking along Route 40 knowing what they were doing and never giving it a second thought. These are real people. They experience real pain. And it is incumbent upon all of us standing here today to act in concert to eradicate human trafficking in all its forms, because sex work is only one of many forms of human trafficking in this state. And we are determined to make sure that Delaware is the first state in the nation, not only because we are the first state in the nation, but because we're going to do the best job in the nation with the best people in the nation working to eradicate it. We have, in the last 5 years, witnessed the arrest of 50 people charged with human trafficking in Delaware. And in each of them, the work that the police did required extensive, complex investigation just to get the state to the stage of arrest. We have, unfortunately, seen plenty of these cases, and those 50 are the tip of what we know is a much larger iceberg underneath. We have seen cases in which, in 2016, 2 men were arrested in Sussex County after an investigation found they were using local motels to run a sex trafficking ring with no fewer than 8 victims. The men used verbal abuse, heroin, and economic dependency to control these victims. 2 years later, federal prosecutors secured a 10-year prison sentence against an airman at Dover Air Force Base for the exploitation of a homeless 15-year-old runaway whom he had picked up and sexually abused for months while she stayed in the barracks. These are just 2 of the dozens of cases we've seen in recent years. We've also been working on this issue for years through innovative work by our Civil Division, including Deputy Attorneys General Zoe Perhoples and Oliver Cleary, among others, to disrupt trafficking at illicit massage parlors through professional regulation, enforcement, and civil law. One notable case involved a man who profited from sex trafficking at massage parlors in all 3 counties. He was convicted of a crime, and he was later found liable under a first-of-its-kind use of Delaware's civil racketeering statute. We have seen firsthand through Zoe and Oliver's work how sophisticated these crimes can be and how important it is to find new approaches to stopping one of the world's oldest and most pernicious crimes. We have made progress, but we have plenty of work left to do. What we've seen, as I said, is just the tip of the iceberg. It's hard to overstate the sheer cruelty of these crimes, and it's chilling to think of the full scale of the issue, even in our little state. That's why this work matters each and every day. And it is why I'm so proud to introduce you to our Human Trafficking Unit today. This is the first time in the Department of Justice's history that we have centralized our anti-trafficking work under a full-time, permanent, dedicated division. I also want to thank two people who are not here today. One is President Judge Jan Jordan, who fought for the Human Trafficking Council along with Abby Rogers, and who kept it alive with no resources to do so. And I want to thank one of my dearest friends, who is also one of the most fearless and fiercest advocates for victims of human trafficking, Mary McDonough. Everybody knows Mary, I think, in this room. And, you know, she ran a court when she was a commissioner in the Court of Common Pleas. She ran a court for human trafficking victims. People tried to shut that court down. They tried to keep this a secret. And Fearless Mary, Fierce Mary, made sure that would never happen, and now she is an integral part of the Council on Human Trafficking. So the unit in our office is made up of veteran prosecutors from all over the state. And when appropriate, we will prosecute to keep people safe from exploitation. But let me be clear, this issue runs much deeper than the criminal justice system alone can solve. We have fantastic investigators in this state. We have investigators before you today, including the Lieutenant Colonel. They've been at this a long time, and they have put together cases that are so difficult. But a lot of the work that we need to do needs to be done through our civil system, as it has in the past, by shutting down illicit massage parlors that engage in human trafficking, by providing services to victims, even if we cannot prosecute, because often prosecution is so very hard, but much needed services that the people in front of you today have provided for years. And we need education to lift everybody in Delaware out of those shadows of doubt, out of those shadows of ignorance, and into a world where when they see it and spot it, they report it, and we take care of it. I am grateful to each and every one of the people in this room who are making this work possible, because we cannot do it alone. You are more than advocates. From reporting to rehabilitation, you are an indispensable part of the solution. And I especially want to thank Senator Nicole Poore and Representative Kim Williams for their tireless work. It's work that they continue to this day. I think I got a phone call about a week ago saying, well, we have another bill we want you to take a look at. And they will never give up. They will never give up, and I'm honored to serve along with them on this mission. With that, I am pleased to introduce Abby Rogers. Abby reminded me today that the two of us started out in the DOJ. Well, I started a long time before Abby did, but we started out in the DOJ on this issue, crafting a human trafficking bill. And then we started out learning as much as we could about it. But Abby is the star here, because she has never, not for one moment, let this issue go. And we just didn't have the resources until the General Assembly, until we got the money and the ability to start this unit. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to my great friend, Family Division Director Abby Rogers.
Thank you, Kathy. Today is a great day in our fight to end human trafficking in the state of Delaware. And after that nice introduction, I'm a little uncomfortable with the story I have to tell, but we're going to do it anyway. This takes me back to 2011 when we started this conversation. And at the time, I had been given the opportunity to work at the Child Predator Task Force, investigating and prosecuting online child exploitation cases. And in my first year, there was a lot of travel and hard to come up to speed, and the content was difficult. And I had the opportunity to meet with Kathy. She was my boss then too, and she sat me down and said, we now need to tackle human trafficking. And I thought, I kind of have a big gig going on here already with this other piece, human trafficking. And to be honest, I thought she was a little crazy, sorry boss, because I knew what human trafficking was. I'd seen the movie Taken, Liam Neeson, cargo containers, third world countries. We certainly did not have that here in Delaware. And so I wasn't sure how we were going to proceed since there was no trafficking. Well, I had the opportunity to go to a training with Shared Hope, and they focus on domestic minor sex trafficking. And boy, did that open up my eyes to what was really happening. And I think the first thing they said that bears repeating over and over again is, let's not get caught up in that idea of trafficking. Let's think of it as exploitation of people. And when you think of that, it opens a whole can of worms, and unfortunately, you can't unsee what you see. I've never looked at a case that has come across my desk the same after that. And that began the path that has led us here today. Human trafficking is a very complicated problem involving many agencies and many issues. Part of the problem out of the gate is that people don't understand what it is and what it looks like here in Delaware. I think instinctually now people get that it probably involves our most vulnerable populations, like our runaway youth or our immigrant populations. But the reality is, and I tell you this having been in this space for 10 years, there is no one profile to a trafficker. They may be a mom, a dad, a boyfriend, an employer, and there's no one profile to a victim. They may be the daughter, the girlfriend, the employee. The reality is that trafficking knows no bounds, social or economic, which adds to the layers of complexity. The mission of this unit is simple. We intend to eradicate human trafficking in the state of Delaware. Success will not be measured in the traditional sense of indictments and convictions, although that will certainly be a part of this. Success will be measured by raising awareness and prevention and education efforts. We intend to make this an inhospitable environment for traffickers, and we will continue to create a healing, supportive, and safe environment for our survivors. Our plan on this is twofold. First, we want to address the underlying issues that cause trafficking in the state of Delaware. Second, we will prosecute as fully as we can, civilly and criminally, anyone who does not get the message that it's done in Delaware. There has been a lot of great work done so far, and I'm thankful to everyone standing on the stage for everything that has been done in the last 10 years and more. But there is more to do. We are proud to say that we have partnered with the Children's Department to work on a program that will allow us to identify high-risk kids early before they can become victims and get them the support and the services that they need. We intend to introduce legislation or draft legislation that will reduce the demand side for the sex trafficking piece. And we will not forget the labor side of this. We are working with the Division of Professional Regulation and the Department of Labor to figure out where there are gaps in those investigations and to move forward there. I'm proud to say we have comprised this unit of individuals with extensive backgrounds and experience, but importantly, they are compassionate and passionate about this cause. We know that we cannot do this alone. There are far too many entities and agencies and individuals who need to be in this fight in order for us to be successful. But today I just want to highlight a couple. First, I want to thank our victims' advocates. They have pushed. For the last 10 years, they are always in my ear about what we need to do and how we need to fight and what we need to do for these survivors. I want to thank our law enforcement partners. especially the Delaware State Police, who have been the lead in combating this problem. And I want to thank our legislators, especially those who, when we went in 2012 and said, we are going to rewrite the entire human trafficking statute, and we want to create a council that will put all of the agencies together to try to come up with a unified plan to combat this issue. That legislation was the first in the country and was a model for other states throughout the nation. So that gives me the chance to introduce, as Kathy said, one of the greatest advocates for this cause, who's been there since day one and has fought and been an advocate every day since, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you, AG Jennings, for your words. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation today and the opportunity to speak. For the past several years, I've worked with Senator Poore, my colleagues in the General Assembly, the Human Trafficking Interagency Coordinating Council, and many of you that are here today to give a voice to the voiceless. The victims of the human trafficking come from all walks of life and can often fall in the shadows and be left behind with no support or resources while their offenders remain free more often than not. In June 2014, Delaware's human trafficking law was signed, which created a human trafficking council, but no funds or supports were attached to this law. The council relied solely on volunteer efforts. In September 2017, a new human trafficking council was created, and some administrative support was included, but not enough. Last year, the state allocated one-time funding of $95,000 to the council. We're extremely grateful to the members of the General Assembly for this funding allocation. This was the first time that funding was provided to the council. I want to take a moment to recognize those that have worked so hard on this council, like President Judge Jordan, Commissioner Mary McDonough, who was really the first person who introduced me to human trafficking at a forum that she held with, I believe, Danny was there, and Zoe Ministries. And that's really where Senator Walsh and I learned really what human trafficking entailed. And it was really eye-opening for me. And she, like Abby said, she was the first human trafficking treatment court in Delaware, and I think A.G. Jennings said that as well. Leslie Brower, Kara Sawyer, and Brian Moore, victim services advocates throughout the state and our council members. I'd like to thank them for their leadership throughout this is such an important issue. This year, through Senator Poore and myself, we hope to secure permanent funding for this council through HB 283 that was just recently released from the House Judiciary Committee last week. This funding will assist the council with their statutory mandates. Without this permanent funding, it will be extremely difficult for the council members to implement the requirements in the Delaware Code. We must also look to fund a full-time executive director and a policy data coordinator. These positions are necessary to carry out this important work. I am very pleased to see the increased role that the Department of Justice has taken with this action of creating the Human Trafficking Unit. I look forward to continuing to work with them on this important issue, along with many other partner agencies. We have so much more work to do, but I'm confident that everyone's work on human trafficking will make a difference throughout the state. Thank you, and I'd like to introduce Senator Nicole Poore.
Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank Attorney General Kathy Jennings for creating this new unit in the Department of Justice and allocating dedicated resources to help root out the criminals who profit from the exploitation of some of the most vulnerable among us. At this time, the true scope of human trafficking in the first state is almost impossible to know for certain, but the latest data suggests that over nearly 100 people, most of them female, many of them children, are victims here in Delaware every single year. Representative Kim Williams and I have been working together for years to bring attention to this heartbreaking victimization and change the way our state deals with these crimes. I have to say that you will find that it is Representative Williams and myself who champion most of the legislation, but we have such a strong legislature that supports us every step of the way and supports that this unit will bring people to justice. Over the recent years, we made sure that children and teenagers preyed upon by those criminals are able to receive the counseling and intervention they need without fearing prosecution. This was a huge issue. We found our victims being prosecuted, and yet the people that were doing this to them were not. The legislature has made it easier for the victims to get their prior criminal records wiped clean and have a fresh start at their life. I also want to compliment Senator Stephanie Hansen to make sure that she found anyone guilty of trafficking crimes is never again able to hold a commercial driver's license. So you will find individual legislators also willing to step up to make sure that we stop this at every single level. And we all have our personal stories because we all have our own districts. And it is sad to see some of these victims. It's sad to hear the families and the survival that they need to put forth to make sure that every single day counts. We also completed and reconfigured the lead counsel on human trafficking to help make sure our judges, our prosecutors, public defenders, police, various state agencies, and advocates are working together to better understand and address human trafficking. Today's announcement is another step forward in our fight against the exploitation of human beings in the first state. I look forward to working with Attorney General Kathy Jennings and the new Human Trafficking Unit as they work to bring these monsters who perpetrate these crimes to justice. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Moore. I'm the chair of the Human Trafficking Interagency Coordinating Council, and I guess the best way to tell you how I got involved in this topic dates back to when I was 16 years old, and as an emergency medical technician working on the Route 13 and Route 40 corridor, took these young women to the hospital almost daily. And in 1 year, I think I had 425 ambulance runs, and of those ambulance runs, at least 100 involved the victims of a sex crime or sex workers who were violated, they were beaten, they were injured, and hearing their life story back then was traumatizing. To a 16-year-old that couldn't tell you the difference between prostitution and human trafficking, and all I knew is that they were hurt and they needed help. And we took them to the hospital and we helped. And that hasn't changed for 30 plus years now. I'm in the same role now. Someone needs help, and our job on the council is to try and make sure that they get it. Attorney General Jennings, you're taking a bold step today. This is Delaware, right? We're the largest small town that there is. And we constantly hear that this does not happen here. And this is verification that indeed everyone on this stage can tell you it absolutely happens here. It happens here every day. And the goal, as Abby said, is to say that it will not be permitted here. That as a state, we're not going to let it. One of the most important roles that we have as a council is to create awareness of the victimization involved in trafficking. And we often, as the Attorney General did, discuss this in terms of darkness and light. These crimes occur deep in the shadows of our communities, and it is our job to provide as many Delawareans with a flashlight of knowledge to see and help those neighbors trapped in that darkness. What Attorney General Jennings has done today, both she and the amazing team that she brings to the fold, is to bring a giant spotlight to this critical issue. And it's a spotlight, in fact, will become a beacon of hope for those who feel hopeless. One of the most devastating acts of violation is the act of destroying someone's sense of humanity and hope. Those who fall prey to the horrific control of traffickers are robbed of their belief that they are anything more than property. They're stripped of their dignity, self-confidence, and free will. This leaves them all the more vulnerable and alone. As Mary has often said, and another huge advocate and ally in this fight, Dr. Joanna Bishop of Wilmington University, remind us that it's our job to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves, who've had their humanity stolen and whose cries have been silenced. Well, as caring Delawareans, and in fact as caring neighbors, we have a responsibility to speak up for them. And today, we can only thank Attorney General Jennings on their behalf for giving a voice to the voiceless, for giving the immeasurable gift of hope to those who desperately want nothing more than to believe that someone cares. The message today, in fact, all of our message today, is that we're here, and in fact, Delaware cares. And to that end, I'd like to introduce one of our best advocates and allies and another partner on our council, Lieutenant Colonel Meadows from the Delaware State Police.
Good afternoon. It's my honor to represent the women and men of the Delaware State Police and the greater law enforcement community here today to share in the news that the Department of Justice has established a dedicated human trafficking unit. Law enforcement shares the concern, the empathy, the desire to seek justice for the victims that have at times been underrepresented. The realities for these victims that have found themselves being controlled by their trafficker through force, fraud, or coercion demand that the entire criminal justice system work together to seek justice for these victims. We will continue to be active partners to investigate these manipulative traffickers. We will continue to train and develop expertise to bring quality cases to the Department of Justice to prosecute these violent predatory offenders. I commend Attorney General Jennings for dedicating talented prosecutors for the mission of establishing this human trafficking unit within the structure of the Delaware Department of Justice. This is an important step in the pursuit of justice for these vulnerable individuals, and on behalf of the Delaware State Police and the Delaware law enforcement community, we thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, please feel free to grab folks in the room. Thank you to all of our speakers and guests.
And once again, thank you, everyone, for coming today, and not just for coming today. I mean, this isn't Attorney General Kathy Jennings, this is everybody up here. Because nothing happens without everybody up here getting together and getting the job done. So I am honored to be with all of you, and thank you for being here today.